Haramim ka Adonai ki dilitani. Adonai Elohai la'olam odeka amen. I will extol you, O Lord, for you have drawn me up. O Lord my God, I will give thanks to you forever. Amen. So the lectionary this year for the month of August, well, the last Sunday in July through most of August, we've pushed it back, is a series in John, from John chapter 6, that clergy like to refer to as 5 long weeks about talking about Jesus as the bread of life. It is, in one sense, the lectionary creating for me a sermon series. And is not perhaps a series to be taken on by the week of heart, because it quite literally is 5 weeks on Jesus being the bread of life. And yet, that said, I think there is so much to be learned as we talk about Christ and the life that we find, the bread of life that we find in God. So, here we go. Today's text from the beginning of John 6 is the feeding of the 5,000, coupled with the miracle of Jesus walking on water. These may be familiar stories to you, and some of that is because the feeding of the 5,000 is the only miracle story, other than, the resurrection one, that appears in all 4 Gospels. All 4 Gospels tell of Jesus feeding 5,000 people with just a few loaves of bread and a couple of fish. And so I think it's perhaps something that we should pay attention to, that all 4 of the Gospel writers found that this was an important story to tell. All of them. And they almost always couple it with Jesus walking on water, Mark being the only one who misses that amazing tidbit of story. Now, because these stories are told so often, because they are told in each of the Gospels and each one has its own flair, let's dig deep into what it is that John is telling us in this story. So in chapter 5, Jesus has healed a man on the Sabbath, which for us is like, yeah, so what? But in ancient times, particularly in Jewish ancient times, that was a big no-no. That's not something you did. You don't work on the Sabbath, and clearly Jesus' work is healing people, so he shouldn't be doing that on the Sabbath, which means that the religious elite get mad at him. They call him out on it, and they have a delightful conversation that I like to summarize as Jesus saying, whatevs. So then Jesus and the disciples get into a boat and they cross the Sea of Galilee, putting him a wee bit closer to home. They're going from one side of the Sea of Galilee to the other side, which is the side that Nazareth is on, but not really that much closer. And they go up a mountain, because that's what you do, right? Cross the lake, go up a mountain. We need more mountains in Minnesota. Anyway, while they're sitting on the mountain, Jesus looks up and sees a huge crowd coming towards him. The paparazzi have found him, and everybody is coming. So then he turns to Philip, one of the disciples, and because this is the Gospel of John, we know that Jesus knows the answer already. He says, so Philip, where are we going to get all the food to feed all of these people? Now Philip is a little confused because he's looking around at the crowd of people and he says, I didn't bring food with me. The other disciples didn't bring food with them. And this is a really large crowd. Like half a year's salary wouldn't buy enough bread for all of these people. Andrew pipes in and says, hey, wait, there's this kid over there. I see he has some bread. And in John, it's barley bread. It's peasant bread. He has some bread and a couple fish from the lake. I think we might be able to do something with it. So Jesus is like, there we go. And now we can move on. So have everybody sit down. All 5,000 of them sit down. Jesus blesses the bread, breaks it, and starts passing it out. Now, you know the next part, right? Everybody eats the bread. Jesus says, okay, we don't want any leftovers to go to waste. Gather that bread back up, and we have 12 basketfuls of leftovers. Having just lived through the yard sale, I think it's almost like saying, hey, this kid over there, he has a couple of things he wants to give away. Do you think we can have a yard sale? Right? Come on, guys. This is funny. There we go. You are awake, right? And then all of a sudden, there is more stuff than you could possibly imagine, right? So justifiable justifiably people are impressed because, oh my gosh, where did all of this bread come from? So they want to get closer to Jesus. Jesus is worried that they're going to want to make him king. And so Jesus does a very classically Jesus thing. He slips away into the crowd and disappears up the mountain. The disciples have no idea that any of this has been happening. And so when evening comes, they go back down to the lake where the boat is, and they're like, wait a second, where's Jesus? Of course, they're already in the boat at this point in time, and 3 or 4 miles away from shore when they notice that Jesus is gone. How they got that far away, I'm not sure, but this is what it is. And then, as they're looking out across the windy landscape of water, there is Jesus walking across the lake. And they're startled. They're like, wait a second, you can't walk on water, Jesus. Get in this boat. Don't drown. And then instantly they've made it to shore. It's one of those crazy stories, right? We know the story, but when we think about the details, it's pretty impressive. It's pretty amazing. Jesus fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And then he managed to escape a crowd of over 5,000 and then walked across a lake to be with his disciples, who mysteriously, and I'm going to say somewhat miraculously, arrived on shore even though they were 4 miles out. What a story. Yet I think the question then comes of why tell this story over and over? Why put these stories in the Gospels? Why do Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all feel that it is so important to tell of that feeding? And Matthew, Luke, and John think it's so important to tell of the walking on water. I think the key here is the reminder that the first thing Jesus wants to make sure of, this crowd is surrounding him, and the first thing he thinks of is, we need to feed these people. We need to make sure that they are taken care of. We need to fill that basic need that everyone has to eat. To eat the food. The beauty of Jesus looking out on that crowd is the first thing he wanted to know is how he could be helping them to fill their needs. How could he fill that need? Now, Jesus, of course, had that answer already because Gospel of John, he's Jesus. He knows all the things. But he also needed to help the disciples understand that. We have this crowd of people. We're not going to send them home. We're going to make sure that they have their fill. And then we're going to do the things that we need to do. This month, we're going to do communion on a weekly basis. I mean, we're talking about Jesus as the bread of life, so why not have the bread of life as a part of our service every week? And the joy of that is the tangible reminder, that reminder that the first thing that happens when we come to God, when we come to faith, is the reminder that the basic needs of life are filled, that God watches over us and helps us to find bread. And to find, in this case, juice, that we may know that love of God, that we may, on a basic level, be fed for nutrition before anything else. That before anything else, God is watching over us. So this day, as we gather, as we share the story of 5,000 people who ate 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, with 12 basketfuls left over. Let us remember that God fills our needs, watches over us, and help others to come and know that feeling as well. Amen.